So welcome everybody. Thank you for the time. We appreciate everybody here on a Saturday, especially our panelists. And I'm extra excited about today. I believe we are going to learn a lot about the DYRK1A speech challenge and things that we can do to help, and also hear from experience from some of our own moms. So just a pretty housekeeping before we start. Everybody, when they join on mute. If you please can keep yourself in the mute if you're not speaking, avoid the background noise. You can and should ask questions in the chat panel. We are going to be monitoring and answer as we go. And the format today is going to be questions and answer. We're going to hear from two specialists, two professionals, and two moms with experience on that. And we have some questions that we grabbed from the Facebook group and some other thing that we heard in the past. So I have a collection of questions that I'm going to start with. But if you have anything extra, please put in the chat and we are going to do our best to respond. The webinar is going to be recorded. It's going to be posted on our Facebook, not Facebook, sorry, our YouTube channel. And we share the link on the Facebook so people can hear. And if you know someone that English is not the first language and they would be able to see in the YouTube channel with the closed captions in different language, that would be helpful for them. Other than that, stay present, enjoy the time, and let's get some fun. Before we start with the panel, there's some announcements that I want to make here. I know we are in the DYRK1A Insights. We are having that every 3 months. So you should expect the next one in March. So if you know a parent, a mom that still don't know about it, you can spread the word. But every 3 months, the DYRK1A Insights, and it's always like some topic. We either have like a research discussing their findings. We are going to have like the panel like this one. And of course, we welcome any suggestions on topics. Also, every 3 months, we have our DYRK1A family chats. We are going to try to see what we can do in terms of technology to help people that do not speak English to be part of those families chat too. And is always a great chance to meet other families, see their challenge, and exchange experience. And their newest release start last month in November is the DYRK1A Digest. And I'm really excited about that. It's a way to keep us connected with like everything that's happening, all the news and what we're going to be doing in terms of research and other things. You can always go to our website, DYRK1A.org, and sign up to receive that email. Is once a month, and it's tied also to our blog. So the blog is going to have like a lot of different topics that we're going to be posting monthly. Stay connected with us on social media. Hashtag our group on Facebook. We are welcome to hear feedback and hear from all the families all the time. One other is like the DYRK1A Bonfire store. We have some new t-shirts that we just launched, some 3 new t-shirt design that you're welcome to buy and have like new DYRK1A logo for Christmas and for the holidays. And all that I'm talking here, you have the link, like the last slide here is just like resource links that has linked to our site, to the Bonfire store, and you can get to know a little bit more that I'm talking here. The other point that I want to do is the speech research. We are in the speech topic right now today in a panel, but there's like a group in Australia that they are doing like a more deep dive into things in DYRK1A and the impact on the speech and the challenges and what they found. So for any research, we need their help. We only are going to understand more about the DYRK1A syndrome and how to help our kids when we have enough information, enough data to understand the details of it. So, okay, if you can, please join the research. It is available in a lot of different language, not only in English. So I know Spanish is available, Portuguese is available. It's is responding a lot of like questionnaire, and also like there's like a team, but doing that we can help each other. There's also like a link in the end of the presentation how to join the research. I'm gonna ask Janet to cover this as a big thank you to all of you. So Janet.
Yeah, sorry, I'm not sure. Have I unmuted myself okay?
Yes.
Oh, great, thank you. Yeah, so just very quick thing to just say, yes, we were successful. So I'm guessing a number of people who are on know that we were putting in or trying to get a number of nominations towards the 12 Days of Giving campaign that Ecclesiastical Insurance were doing for our UK charity. And we've been successful. It's probably about the third year we've tried, so we're really pleased. So it's all down to having loads of nominations from everybody. So if you did nominate or share, then really appreciate it. So yes, we'll receive £1,000 and be able to use those funds towards the cost for the hopefully next Families Meetup conference in the UK next year. And we had to postpone this year, so but it will be there for whenever the next one. Okay, thanks.
All right, thank you, Janet, and thank you all of you that went online to nominate the charity. With that, we are ready to start our panel. I have to thank you very much, our panelists today. Their broad knowledge here. We have, since we are an international association, we have professionals and parents from US and from Europe. So we start with Amy Rush. So Amy is a specialist speech and language therapist based in UK. She has 13 years experience to work with children and adults with complex needs. She's a TOC 2 level 4 therapist and is trained to level 2 in Prompted. She has a special interest in assistive technology and supporting everyone to be able to have a chance to communicate. Our second profession is Jennifer Bailey. Jen is owner of Leap Pediatric Therapy here in US. She is a speech and language pathology and feeding specialist. Jen graduated from Appalachian State University in 2009 in communication science and disorders and a minor in special education. In 2011, she completed her master. Jen is prompt trained in her primary areas of interest is infant feeding, oral motor development, apraxia, and early language development. In her free time, she enjoys work on renovating her farmhouse, doing DIY projects, watching crime shows, traveling, and spend as much time outside as possible. And time outside right now is great with all the COVID, right? So thank you for our two professionals. We also have Amy Clugston. Amy, as everybody knows, is mom of Lorna. Lorna is 24 years old, and Amy has been active parent leader serving in many capacities within her local community. Throughout the state of Michigan, in both national and international for the past 20 years. Her outreach and advocacy started just 3 years after her daughter Lorna was born with multiple congenital anomalies that would begin an 18 years diagnostic odyssey. Her commitment to the voice of parents started as a parent representative on a local interagency coordination council for early on, a service that continued beyond 10 years. Her services extend to numerous boards and committees, including Syndromes Without a Name and DYRK1A Syndrome US. Now coordinate the DYRK1A Syndrome International Association. She also is part of Parent to Parent and with like the Michigan Alliance for Families, Midwest Genetic Network, and Allegan County Community Mental Health, and several subcommittees for specific projects. Another mom, we have Linda Klindrup. Linda is mother of Anders, 15 years old. He has just been diagnosed with dyslexia. Linda has been trying many things to help Anders throughout the years. She hosted an event some years ago with their speech therapists in Denmark, where they met families from UK, Germany, Poland for the weekend. She was a speaker at an event in UK a year after the training. So lots of knowledge here. I'm excited. Thank you very much, all of you. With no more, let's get started with some questions here that I bet everybody's curious to know more. So the first one here, I will start with Amy Rush. What's the recommended age to start speech therapy?
I would say there is no recommended age. And me personally, as a therapist, I would say start as soon as you can. If you think there's difficulties, if you've got concerns, I very much am more of a preventative therapist. I think start as soon as you can, work on the issues. So there's no real start age, in my opinion. I think as young as possible.
So what about you, Jen?
I would say the same thing. I mean, language starts not long after birth. The child's understanding, the child's ability to engage in their environment, listening to sounds, demonstrating different cries. There are so many early language development, skills to be looking for. So yeah, I would say the second that you notice that things are not developing as they should, that's the time for sure.
That's great to know. And from your perspective, Amy, Clusten, and Linda, at what age did you start an intervention with Anders or Lorna?
Well, I can
Amy?
about
Go ahead, Linda.
Yeah, Anders was one of the first ones we found that was found. So no one knew what was going to happen. No one knew that he had difficulty speaking. So he was pretty old, a couple of years, and then we started sign language, and we didn't know anything. So they tried also with some pictures and a book that Anna should try and look in and tell us what he wanted. Didn't work. So he was. We wish that we had started greater training at a much younger age, because what actually helped was the speech training that we started 3 years ago, and Anna's is 15 now, so we are a bit far behind. So I can say the same thing as Jennifer and Amy, as young as possible.
So it's definitely good. Is for all of us that are coming to this journey now, right? I know there's a lot of like new babies and new kids that were just diagnosed and joined the group. It's good to have this knowledge and start as soon as you can. Thank you for that. How old was Lorna when you start, Amy?
Well, Lorna was 12 months old when she started speech therapy. And like Linda, we didn't know, what was going on with her, but we knew something was happening. And so we had an early intervention evaluation much before that. And so she was getting other therapies, but it wasn't until 12 months when we really kind of picked up on that she had some speech delays that we started speech therapy. But definitely now that we know that a mutation in DYRK1A has a good potential of having some significant speech delays and impairments, if you have the diagnosis, I would say get therapy as soon as you can.
Thank you. So since a baby, like, and you talk a little bit, right, that there's different ways that kids start their communication as young as baby with like different way. What's the therapy, speech therapy looks like when they're like an infant or a toddler? Because I assume it's different than try to make them say words.
I was just going to say, there's a question in the chat. Just, I think it's more to Linda about Anders. If you just want to, I don't know if you want to answer that. It's just asking what speech training you're doing with Anders.
Now we have we found out that he had dyspraxia. We actually found a private teacher, and she looked at him and said he has dyspraxia, and we didn't know what that was. And the school was at a meeting with us, and they actually just said that, oh yeah, maybe, but he has so many other things. So yeah, maybe dyspraxia. But then we started training like after like that, if he had that diagnosis, and that really helped us a lot, because all the other things that we tried didn't work. He uses a lot of signs, and he uses pictures and so on, and he wants to communicate, but we wanted to try a little about to train his voice, and no one did that until we had this speech therapist. So we actually started. It's very intensive, but Anders can't concentrate for more than about 1 minute or 2 minutes. So actually talk 2-3 times a week, training just 1 minute at a time. That really helped.
That's good. Thank you, Linda. And just a follow up on that then, for start with Amy Rush. Like, what are different diagnoses that can make speech harder? Because we talk about like DYRK1A overall, but as Anders, he has like dyspraxia, and I know there's some in the group that has apraxia. What are the different diagnoses that make hard, and is that will impact like how you approach?
Yeah. So dyspraxia and apraxia are actually they're the same thing kind of, but I think they're used a little bit differently across the UK and USA. So I think USA tend to use apraxia of speech, whereas we would say dyspraxia. So if we say apraxia in the UK, that means no planning of speech at all. So it's used slightly differently. So dyspraxia is difficulties with the motor planning of speech. So it's kind of basically the message getting from here to here. That's the issue. So like Linda's saying, kind of those short, sharp bits of therapy, that's kind of the way that it's often worked on. And then approaches we would use here are things like, well, I say here, independently, not so much in state services, but talk tools, prompt, kind of hands-on, tactile, that kind of thing. And then other things that can impact are things like dysarthria. So that's where it's a weakness in the muscles. So you might hear things like slurring, that kind of thing, and difficulty in getting the movements working rather than disordered movements. You also might have, let me think, and then probably they're probably the main two for your population. I don't know whether Jen can add anything on top of that, main ones.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes, and I don't know if this is directly what you're asking, but I know sometimes this can be linked also with autism. So I think sometimes we see different types of speech difficulties with a child that presents with, characteristics of autism as well. So separately from those things that are the motor planning or the motor speech disorders, like, what Amy's discussing, sometimes we have other things that kind of can combat a child's interest in communication or their abilities to kind of connect with others around them. And an autism diagnosis would kind of lead more towards that social aspect of communicating and connecting with peers or with family members. So yeah, sometimes I think there are different things that can make it difficult for them to communicate, but I think the motor speech one would probably be the most difficult part And kind of building off of what Amy was saying, yeah, in the US, we use something called childhood apraxia of speech as a way to describe it. And I think the main difference, kind of going off of what you were saying, Amy, is that that generally means that the child is not speaking. Sometimes that does mean, it's hard to diagnose that until we've heard a child speak and can kind of, determine that they are having this motor planning disorder. But yes, they're just different terms that, like she said, really, really kind of mean and describe the same thing.
I'm just aware that there's UK parents and American parents, and I'll say slightly different things to you. So just to avoid confusion.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that.
So yeah, I heard that like the diagnose or like the motor skills and things like that, but also about the autistic. And I know a lot of our kids, they also have the diagnosis of autistic. So coming to you, Amy Cludston, I know, did Lorna had some of that diagnosis before you knew was DYRK1A, and you treat behavior like a ways to communication too?
Yeah, Lorna did get a diagnosis of dyspraxia before she had the DYRK1A diagnosis. So definitely motor planning was a big thing for her and still is. But she doesn't have the diagnosis of autism, but along those same lines, she definitely has social issues, and that definitely affects her wanting to talk to people. And so she's a much reserved child, and she would be she's much happier by herself. So that also impacts her speech.
Can I add something?
Thank you.
Can I add something to that, perhaps?
Yeah, of course.
Because Anders is very social, actually, and he wants to communicate. So it was a good thing for us that he got this diagnosis, so we could train for the right way, because he really, really wanted to communicate, but he couldn't get the words out. It was like he has all the words in his head. He knows what he wants to say, but he just can't get it out. So this training has been really great for him, trying to make this planning for him. So we actually got up to 3 words now, but it's often we have to train very hard, just to help him with that, because he forgets it. He easily forgets it. And I think that is one of the main problems with the dyspraxia also, that it doesn't, when we train, the words doesn't get on the shelves, or how to say it. They forget them if it's not practiced. Isn't that right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. You're basically having to, you're basically reprogramming the brain. So that's why you have to keep doing it repetitively to kind of reprogramming a motor plan for how to do that. So that's why he probably forgets it. Eventually he will retain it, but it's a lot of, like you say, a lot of training to get there.
Can I ask how old your son is?
He is 15.
Okay.
Someone just asked as well if you can have a diagnosis of apraxia if you've got a speech delay. Yes, you can, 100%.
Oh, and just I know, like, to help with the diagnose, we need a lot of like because as you mentioned, like, we know our kids, like Amy mentioned, like Lauren is more reserved. She's not as prompt to communicate in the other way. Anders is, he wants to, he's social. To get those diagnosed, I heard, sorry, I don't remember if it was Amy, Rush, or Jen, about like, and you need to hear the kid talk to be able to diagnose. So what's the how young the kid can be until you can really give that diagnosis? Because I'm assuming you cannot do that for like babies or like early toddlers.
I think that answer will probably be different for me and Jen, possibly, because I think it might be slightly different in the States. But for me, you don't have to hear someone talk because there's different labels in this country. I don't know if there is in America. So we have verbal dyspraxia and oral dyspraxia. So if someone isn't verbal yet, then they would get the diagnosis of oral dyspraxia. But it's certainly not at the level of being a baby or anything. But it can be as young as 3 years old. You know, it can be that young for us. But it's probably different for Jen. I'm not sure about that. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's somewhat similar to diagnose a child with, childhood apraxia of speech, as we use here. You really do have to hear the way that a child is trying to produce sounds in order to say that is dyspraxic. Now, it is separate from an oral dyspraxia, which may be, difficulty with eating, difficulty with, moving the muscles of their mouth for, things that you would see before you would expect verbal language. So yeah, I do think that there are times when we can kind of observe global dyspraxia in the body during gross motor development, and we can kind of assume that that's going to be residual into the muscles of the mouth. And so in order for us here to say a child has a diagnosis of childhood apraxia of speech, it can't just be that a child's 3 years old and not talking. We can't just say, oh, they have apraxia. There has to be other things that lead into that. And so that's most often when we start to try to get them to imitate sounds. We get them to try to, show us how their mouth is forming sounds and trying to make words. And at that point, we can then say, yeah, their mouth is, and their brain and their mouth are not connecting to shape these words and sounds the way that we would anticipate that it would. And so we can kind of assume at this point that the child is demonstrating verbal apraxia. And a lot of times it does go hand in hand with what's happening globally in their body as well. So.
Can I
Yeah, I
add
think,
just something to that also?
yeah, of course.
Because, it's common that all of our children have difficulties eating, and that indicates as well, I think, that they have these difficulties with their muscles in their mouth. So could we indicate that a lot of our children actually has this oral dyspraxia and can actually be diagnosed much younger because they have these feeding difficulties as an infant?
That's a great point, Linda. We do have like the majority of the group has some feeding difficulties, and especially like some have like the feeding tube or options like that. So make like a really interesting for this next question here. How does the speech therapy relate or coordinate with other therapies? So we start with Jan.
Oh, okay. So a lot of times, here in the US, we work a lot with physical and occupational therapy, especially in what I do with early intervention, because we really feel like treating one part of the child is important to treat the entire child. So when we look at a child's development, most often we'll notice issues with feeding, either at birth, or issues with their gross motor delay, as they're not showing signs of holding up their head or showing signs that they're trying to roll and those types of things. And so a lot of times we work together. Like she said at the beginning, the majority of what I do is feeding therapy. So I generally get these babies right out of the hospital, and I am looking for signs of different feeding readiness. So I'm looking that they can, suck, that they can maintain a suck, swallow, breathe coordination, that their lips are closed nicely to the breast or the bottle, that they don't get fatigued during feedings, that type of thing. And so as I'm working with these families and their child is continuing to grow and change, I'm looking for gross motor changes as well. So I'm looking for their ability to hold their head up. I'm looking that they can transition into, having time on their tummy, that they're trying to push through their arms, that they have, that both sides are happening and working equally together, those types of things, so that I know that they're building strength and readiness for beginning to eat solid foods. So they all kind of work together. The body is, a very, so it's great to be able to have a team approach and address all of those things because they very much work with each other. And I'm very blessed here in the States. We have so many great options in early intervention and in clinics and hospitals. I'm sure it's very similar in the UK as well. But yeah, I think it's important to have a team approach. And I think that really does, impact their long-term development.
I think you guys are ahead of us, I will be honest. Having done quite a lot of my training in the States or through the States, it will often be discussed, oh yeah, we refer to this person, refer to this person, refer to this person. We don't have a lot of those people. So being a private therapist, I'm not employed by the NHS or whatever, I do have a lot more multidisciplinary teams. So I do have dietitians, occupational therapists, physiotherapists, hydrotherapists, all of that kind of thing. So I'm quite blessed in that respect, but not everybody has that option. Not everyone has the finance to have that option. So it's very much what you can get access to. So, it's going through knows that can be a waiting list for things. So I've lost everyone on video. Oh, there we go. So I do have access to people, but it's few and far between. It's not as good as the States, but it's very important to think about, exactly like Jen said, about all those other aspects. So if I'm running in like an oral placement program with somebody, who I did have the pleasure of running one after I came to the UK conference, I've started running one with somebody from the DYRK1A charity. And it's about thinking about the sensory aspects. So maybe getting an OT involved or thinking about those things. And but it's how to access it really in the UK. So.
Nice. On having that information, because I think so often we do take the situations that we're in for granted. I feel very blessed as a therapist to have those support systems around me too. I think it's helped me so much as a therapist. And I think it's just great that you do have, that knowledge too, to be able to look at the child as a whole and consult with other people around you to help build your practice as well. So that's great.
Yeah. And I think a lot of speech therapists here are taking sensory integration modules and things so that they can do a lot of it for themselves as well. So I've taken quite a few modules in that. So just to be able to do it really. So
yeah, that's excellent.
That's nice. So we heard like a lot of like different therapies and get the kids as a whole, right? And you, Amy Clarkson, you mentioned like Lorna starts like a lot of different therapies as early intervention. Can you elaborate a little bit how you believe that helped Lorna early on?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, Lorna was pretty lucky to get a early intervention evaluation. So she was about 4 months old. So we just happened upon the person who was doing evaluations, and I'm talking 24 years ago. So that's why it seems a little early in that time, but maybe not today. But so we didn't get referred to by our doctor, but I just met the early intervention evaluator, so I was able to connect with her. And so I did mention that Lorna was getting other therapies, and she was getting OT initially when she was 4 months old. And along the same lines is the OT didn't strictly stick to just OT things. And so she would come to our home and also work on like oral motor and also just the like her movements as far as crawling, walking, sitting, and such. So she kind of worked on Lorna as a whole child, but then by the time she was 12 months old, we realized that she needed some extra speech therapy, which is when we introduced that. So.
Nice. Were you able to do the same with Anders? Like how because we are comparing like US early intervention and like Europe. What your experience out there, Linda?
Well, it's we don't have actually the same opportunities. Well, maybe we do, but they don't get them. Anders was is in special school, but no one knew what the problem was. So he didn't get examined. He was in hospital, and they checked that he could see and he could hear. And I had to ask for an exam for his mouth, his oral motion, and they said that that was fine. But when we just got the diagnosis with dyspraxia, the doctor there, he's a specialist. We paid for it ourselves. He was actually he said that there was really something wrong with Anders's mouth. So he was a bit confused, that's why they didn't see it earlier. I think in Denmark we have these special schools and the therapists are there, and the therapist has to deal with a lot of children at the same time. So Anders had speech therapist 3 weeks a year, I think. And then
3 weeks a year.
Yeah. That was why I found this private teacher, and that was the difference for us.
What I'm learning here, and if I can share with the rest of like people in the presentation, is the importance of us really like be the voice of our kids and like kind of fight for them. Yes, the US is fortunate to have those early intervention and those available. I'm original from Brazil, and I talked to some parents that have the same diagnosis down there, or even like other special needs. And yeah, it's not as simple as US. And even here in US, sometimes you need to fight and to get the voice of your kid. My own experience with Luna, before we had the diagnosis, like we went to the hospital when she was 2 weeks old, and they couldn't find anything. They released saying like, come back in 6 months. And I was like, you're crazy, come back 6 months. And you have to fight, and because yeah, we have the resource here, but we need to make sure we have access to it, and we need to speak up and say like, no, I'm not coming back and wait 6 months to see what's happening. I know something is going on. So we need to learn to be strong and be the voice. And I hope our community, our DYRK1A family can help each other to give a little bit of experience, like how to speak up and how to fight when we need something for our kids. Change a little bit, like I'm heard a lot of like different terms here, like the oral placement therapy, prompt therapy, therapy that's specific for dyspraxia. So start with, let's see, who is in front of my video here is Amy Rush. So from the UK perspective, can you elaborate in all those different types of speech therapy?
Yeah, so both of them are American, as per usual. Talk Tools is probably the one that's a bit further ahead here. So that's oral placement therapy. I'm a level 4 trained. I had to go to Texas to be a level 4 trained. And it's very much the kind of missing piece of a lot of speech therapy approaches we tend to find. And I've just what you've been saying about Anders, Linda, is you've sort of said that it would have been nice to get started sooner. Don't feel bad about that, because it's never too late to start. I just recently started working with somebody who was 15. I've been working with him for 12 months. He had no speech, and now he has 3-word phrases from doing Talk Tools and Prompt. So it's never too late. And when you find that missing piece, it really does make a difference. So it's all about hands-on tactile feedback, and it uses a series of equipment, really specialist equipment that again is provided by Talk Tools, and then it gives them the sort of placement within their mouth of how to do movements for speech and feeding. So yeah, and like I say, I have done a program with someone, 2 programs actually, for people with DYRK1A, and it's worked beautifully because it's given them that feedback they need to know what they meant to be doing with their mouth. It's particularly good for dyspraxia because of the motor planning element. And then prompt really is an add-on to that, so that's a separate approach, and that gives hands-on cues for speech sounds. There's 4 different levels of prompts depending on the difficulty. There's a more simple version that gives you a basic shape of the mouth, and then there's individual ones for different speech sounds. And again, that's starting to get bigger in the UK, and we do get people ringing us now specifically asking for that. So people are starting to get an idea of what it is, but I think the 2 of those go hand in hand, and the prompt is just for the speech, and then the Talk Tools can help with the speech and the feeding. So, but it's certainly much bigger in the US, and I don't know what it's like elsewhere, but I know is it Denmark, Linda, that you're in? That's certainly got some therapists there. So.
Okay, they do. I just asked actually, but I have been reading about prompts, and we have some on YouTube because we have none available.
Right.
But it's certainly something that I will discuss with our therapist.
It is a bit thin on the ground prompt. It's only sort of just starting to grow, and it's a bit more difficult to do the training. It's very much just for speech and language therapists, that one, whereas Talk Tools, you can be a parent and do some training. So yeah, I don't know, Jen probably has something to add to that because she is an American, and she's one of the founding people. So
yeah, that would be awesome to hear from your perspective, Jen.
I will take 0 credit for any of that. The only credit I can take is that I live here in America. But yes, I also am prompt trained, and I do use Talk Tools in my practice as well. They're both phenomenal. And yeah, everything that Amy said is exactly right in how they're used. I did see a question come on here. What is a prompt? Prompt is a type of therapeutic strategy that we use where we basically facilitate the actual speech or motor movements that we want a child's or a person's face to make in order to make a certain speech sound. So I kind of compare it to like, physical therapy for the mouth. You want a child's legs to move, you're going to place their feet and legs in certain places so that their body can receive that signal and say, oh, this is what that feels like. It's the same thing, just for the mouth. So we're going to cue their faces, their lips, their tongue, their cheeks, all these things to create a certain movement that then elicits a speech sound. So that's kind of the condensed version of it. But Amy is much further trained in prompt than I am. I am in a lower level than she is, but so she's definitely the expert there. But that's essentially what it is. I don't know if I answered any questions, but I think Amy did an amazing job.
Thank you. Did Lorna get any of those therapy, Amy? I think that those are more kind of recent techniques.
No, she hasn't. She didn't get any of those types of therapy programs. But I would be interested in knowing a little more. Amy Rush, could you type out the other program other than prompt? Just trying to, see how that's spelled and do some maybe research. And is there any resources for families if they want to advocate to their speech therapist for both of those programs?
So for Talk Tools, yeah, so there's Talk Tools itself have a really good website. And on there, they've got a really nice section now, which has got all of their kind of, I will be brutally honest, their research is few and far between, which is why in the UK, it's not so heavily advocated because studies before they'll use anything. Yeah, ahead head over there and have a look. And then there is also there are some webinars which you can sign up to and watch, like a basic introduction if you did want to learn a little bit more. And then there are some documents you could have a little read of. A really good one is by the founder, Sarah Rosenfeld Johnson, which is sort of about oral motor myths. That's a really good one to start reading because it sort of gives you real basics of what is talk all about. So that's a really good one. But yeah, and you're always welcome to email me if you've got any questions. Totally welcome to.
Thank you. Let me go here to the chat. There's like some comments and some follow-up questions on what we are just discussing. So those different techniques, and if the kid, like, if the kid didn't start as a toddler, start like later on, like, is there any therapy that can help move a teenager from no speech apraxia? And would that differ from would start the therapy with a toddler?
So any
So Janet is asking, so is it okay? I'll go to Amy for the answer. But if there's any therapy that will help a teenager to move from apraxia to some speech?
I would say yes, definitely. I have done that exact thing with a number of people and used things like oral replacement therapy, prompt, and then general speech therapy all together. So yes, definitely.
So just like a perspective on other countries. So Claudia is saying that we see here in Belgium, you need a label to have access to specific service. Our daughter now has the label severe chronic speech disorder. We need that label to get access to prompt it. And I would say, at least what I see here in California and the West, you need labels sometimes to get access to things too, especially when it's related to our insurance. I know my insurance will cover some extra service if my daughter has a label of like autistic, other than DYRK1A, that there's no like a formal code to the disease. Of course, I don't have the experience international, but I would say it's more common than not that we need the labels. Not saying that I believe that's right, but is another thing that we need to really like speak up. I don't know from other areas, like I know I'm in California, but if you go and I know, Jan, it might be talk about like your experience with like insurance and what they cover or not in your experience. How much do you need the labor in the East Coast there?
Yeah, it really depends on a lot on the insurance agency, as well as even down to the individual plan that each family might be on. Some services are covered. I've had some families that get, all of their speech, physical, occupational therapies covered, unlimited visits for the whole year. I have other families who get 10 to 15 visits a year covered. And yeah, like you were saying, they have to have a very specific label. So I think it very much varies, just really on insurance plans, which is unfortunate, but yeah.
Right. So I learned that's not an uncommon thing internationally. So I don't know, I just don't know if I understood well, but you mentioned something about a study to look for malformations inside the mouth. If I'm correct, how do you can tell? So is there some test or something that you do to see if there's malformation and treat speech in a different way?
I would just do an assessment as part of my speech therapy assessment. But if there was anything particularly obvious that I observed, I would refer on to an ENT, which I'm sure Jem would do something similar. If there's anything that needs sort of addressing, like tonsils, adenoids, teeth, that might be specialist dentist or something I would refer on. But if it's something like tongue function, jaw function, then that would be me to work on that. So.
How about here, Jan?
Structural, we would refer on to someone else, something that, you know, seems to be kind of neuromuscular or something like that. Obviously, they probably have a, you know, a neurologist. If not, potentially refer them to a neurologist if it's something that anatomically is fine, but the musculature seems off or seems asymmetrical. Then yeah, otherwise that would be something that we would address.
Thank you.
The one that sorry, the one that Carol just asked about tight lips, I would work on that, unless it was a frenulum tie, so underneath his lip, then that would get referred to be cut. But if it's just more of a muscular, that would be an oral placement program.
Thank you, Emmy. So we talk about like different techniques of therapy, like to talk and like kind of move the mouth. But I know some kids are not gonna get to really talk, and for that we have like the other ways, the communication, sign language, PACS, and ASC device. So what are the options, and when would you recommend those different options? Let's start with Jan.
And talk tools are phenomenal resources, but they're not always appropriate for every single child. And so I think it is important to explore the other options and figure out which one is the best one for your child. So augmentative communication devices, you know, generally come with an age of cognition to kind of understand how to manipulate different devices. We use, you know, simple button switches and work our way up to a more complex system. But it does require, you know, a child's kind of understanding that it's not a toy, that it is their voice per se. Sign language has its limitations, you know, because if the person on the receiving end of that signed message doesn't understand it, then the communication breakdown, you know, takes place, and that's frustrating to everyone involved. And then using picture exchange, you know, for some children that works. For other children, it doesn't, because it's not as concrete, or it's not as quick, or, you know, effective. You got to go find it. It's not always readily available. So there are challenges with each one. And I feel like as a therapist, I tend to use a more dynamic communication approach, where I try to use a variety of all of these things, and kind of trying to figure out what works best for the child, what works best in their home, as well as any other environments that they are exposed to make it easiest and most effective for that child.
What are your thoughts, Emmy Rush?
I would echo exactly what Jen has said. We tend to use total communication, like what she said. So we often are working on speech at the same time as using some sort of AAC if it's appropriate. But I have to admit, I don't always go through that process of a switch and then something else and then a device. A lot of my students are ready; they just go straight to an iPad, and we pick an appropriate piece of an application. Like, a lot of people choose an iPad because it's super portable these days, and it's also much lower cost than going towards the sort of high tech options. I don't know what it's like in the States for how that's funded and things, but we've got a couple of hubs in this country that you go to depending on where you live, but to get into them is a real battle. So you have to fill in paperwork after paperwork and then get into them, and then you're not always ending up with the system that you might want. So a lot of families choose to self-fund. So an iPad is much lower cost than a £7,000 communication aid. So yeah, an iPad. Most popular one is Proloquo to Go, which I don't know if you use that in this. Yeah, Jed's not. She's nodding. That's good. And then we work with school staff, parents, everybody to program it and and it's often quite quick the progress people make with that as well. Just started that with recently with somebody, and she's flying through it. It's lovely, really good. But I think a lot of parents automatically think that if someone's going to be using AAC, then they won't speak, and that's actually not the case. There's a lot of research to show that it will actually increase speech. So never have that fear that if you're going down the AAC route that it will stop speech, because that's not the truth.
So Emmy, Clarkson, and Linda, does Anders or Lorna use any type of like AAC device or technique?
Yeah, Lorna, we started off with Lorna doing some simple signs. She just used like more, hungry, eat, and those types of things when she was really, really young. And then we tried way before, like I said, Lorna's 24, so before the whole iPad generation. And but we did try ancient device, and it didn't work well for her at the time. And then we later on in her life we tried Prologo to Go, and she could easily navigate that. But the challenge for her is that she does have some speech, so she does talk to people, but her articulation can be difficult for other people to understand. And so it was my hope that she would use the device, the iPad with Prologo to Go, as a supplement to times where people couldn't understand her. But the problem for her is that we spent time in the clinic, and she could easily navigate and go to the locations to use the buttons, but she did not want to use it anywhere else because she's very like strict in how she functions in the world. And so she felt like that she could only use the device in clinic. And so we really didn't, she didn't transfer that over to using it in school or out in the community. And of course, you know, at home we could understand her, so we didn't really like force it. So I didn't want to force her to use it in an environment where we could understand her spoken language. And so that's how it kind of ended up for us. So
yeah, and I can continue about Anna's. We started out with this sign language, and when he started school, they said that we had to decide which communication system we wanted to use because it couldn't go hand in hand. And we said that yes, it can. It must go hand in hand because Anders cannot go on the playground with Prolog or PEX or pictures or anything. He needs to use his body language to be seen. It's not easy to ride a bike with an iPad, for instance. So we said that they had to use both, and we have discovered that Anders is actually capable of using a great variety of systems to communicate. He uses what is working in the situation. So he can go on the computer and look for a picture that is similar to the situation that he wants to talk about. And we have talked to the school about this picture. So the prologue, it's not prologue he uses, but something similar. That they uses it in the school situations we has to learn. When he has to learn figures, numbers, etc. So they use it when he is sitting down. And when he's active, he uses anything else, actually. And in the training now, we actually use it to slow him down. We use it this because we are working on the voice, and we use the signs to slow him down, to be able to, I don't know, the hands make the words, and you have to slow your voice down and follow your hands. And the same about the pictures. So I think this goes well hand in hand for us, that we combine all the tools we have. Does that make sense? Or is my in Danish
Yes.
it's much more easier?
It does make sense. I believe here everything like the importance is for them to communicate, and even what I'm using here with my daughter is trying to give her tools that we test it out and make sure it works for her, so she knows signs. She's way more younger than yours. She uses signs, and we start with AAC in a really beginner's level. That's just she likes to press the button in the AAC and try to repeat the words. So it's kind of cute to see, and I have to validate what Amy Rush mentioned, that the AAC doesn't remove the language, because for her, she tries to repeat what the iPad is saying. Here, I was fortunate enough in the US that we got her AAC through school. So we don't own the device or the program. That was through her school. We asked during the IP, we want to try it out. They did the assessment and thought, like, yeah, Luna cognitive is in that stage that we can use the device. So we have an iPad that is with that program. And even though she loves iPad, she doesn't see that as an iPad. It's kind of interesting. She has her iPad that's like she can watch Peppa Pig, or that's our personal, and that school iPad she only sees as a different device, even though it looks the same for her. That's her little communication there. We remove any of other stuff, so like she doesn't really see that it can do the same thing. That was really important for us, so she can keep in the correct screen instead of like try to watch Peppa Pig in the device. I think that separation is really important. We are gonna go now for some sensitive questions. It's like how we know that the therapists are doing a good job, right? And we have some questions here, like kind of how do I access progress? Because there's a borderline, like kind of I understand it's hard to judge, because is what my daughter is going to be able to progress, like her limitations or what she's going to do, and the work of like a professional, like a therapist. So as a mom, is there a way that I can access the job that my therapist is doing to see like, okay, it's the work is good, it's just like I need to wait my daughter, or is it time to change therapist? So is there any insight that you can give, Amy Rush, like kind of how as a parent you can access those type of situation?
I think probably, again, it's probably a little bit different in America in terms of how you access therapy and how it works. But I think for us over here, in terms of how to make it the most successful with a family, is keeping you involved in the whole process. So for me, working with a family, having you involved in the therapy sessions is first of all really important. And then also, if you're not able to be present, send in session summaries after each session. What are we working on? What are the goals? And then having homework between each session to continue those goals. But then in terms of evaluating the therapist, I think it's important to get the right therapist to start with. So it's checking those credentials of the therapist and, what is their experience? Have they got the right experience for your child? who do they usually work with, and you can check things like that out on their sort of registered body and that kind of thing. And then in this country, for private therapists, there is a site you can go to and you can look up their kind of profile and things. But it's, yeah, picking the right therapist in the first place. And then I think never feeling afraid if you're not happy with the therapist to say something, because we do have families, I think, that are too afraid sometimes to maybe question the therapist. So I think stopping and saying, okay, I'm not really sure about this. Why are you doing it? So asking that question, I think. And then the other thing would be to, as you're going along, make sure the therapist is involved in the review meetings as well, because that's another important thing they can play a role in. I think the question about when is it time for a new therapist, I think when you start making progress, and two, when they're not offering you anything, really, I think would be the honest answer, and when you're not happy with them. I think if you have an honest conversation at a point when you're not happy and they can turn it around, then it would, obviously you can continue. But it very much depends on how it's being funded in this country as well, because if it's an NHS therapist, then you can go to them and say, I want to change therapists. That's quite easy. But if it's a private therapist, obviously you're funding it, so you're even more in control, and you can say, I'm not happy with your services. So you have got a lot more control when you're funding it versus NHS. You might need to go to a manager. So it's quite a daunting process when you're not happy. I don't know how it works in America, though. I'll let Jen answer that one.
Thank you, Em. What's your take on that, Jennifer?
Yeah, I mean, I would say the same thing. It works very similarly here. So I think it's important from the beginning, just like Amy said, to have an open conversation with your therapist. One of the biggest mistakes that I feel like I can look back on myself and say that I made early on as a therapist was not involving the family as much in what their goals were for their child. We so often just think like, oh, I'm the therapist, I did the assessment, these are the areas in which the child needs, to work on or has deficits, these are the goals. But that's not always the only thing that matters. And I think it's really important that your therapist be saying what things are important to you as a family, like what things do you want your child to be doing? Because those things are just as equally important. And as a therapist, I know that you're more likely to work on those things, even when you don't feel, skilled, or you don't feel as confident in working maybe on some of the other things. I know that those things that are important to you, that you'll feel confident facilitating those and working on those. And I think it's just an open conversation throughout. I think a good therapist would say, hey, listen, I think we're plateaued here for a little bit. I think we're not making the progress that I'd like to see. These might be the reasons why. How do you feel? Should we take a break for a little bit, allow the child to have some, of their own cognitive growth, and then regroup? I think it's just really important to have those open conversations from the beginning. And I think it's absolutely appropriate to question your therapist. Why are you doing these things? What do you expect to see from doing these things? How can I, as a parent, facilitate these things when I'm not a licensed therapist? Teach me what to do. I think it's so important to build that relationship with your therapist. And it's also okay if just personalities don't mesh. If your therapist and your child just don't really click, that's an okay reason to get a new therapist too. We don't all connect with each other, and that's okay. If you didn't like your pediatrician, you wouldn't hesitate to get a new one. So I think it's appropriate to just trust your parent instinct on that for sure.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the honest input here. I appreciate what I got. It's like, yeah, communication, open conversation, and that's how we're gonna get the best of like the work. We are approaching the end of our talk. I have one thing here is coming back to the previous question about the AAC device, like the iPad with communication or and another AAC. What age would you recommend to give an iPad or those devices? Jen?
I think it kind of depends on the kid. I wouldn't necessarily say that there's an actual age. I think when the child kind of shows you that they have that ability to manipulate it, you know, kids these days are so insanely good with technology. Like, it just blows my mind what kids can do with our phones and other things. I'm like, wait, who are you texting? You know, my friends' kids will hold my phone. They can do the most amazing things with technology. So I think once you see that they can appropriately use it and they understand that when they're pushing a button, that it's sending a communication signal. It's not a toy. They're not just pushing it to hear it, the pictures say nice, funny things, that it has intention. And so I think for each child, that's going to be a little bit different. But I think that, you know, looking to see that your child has that understanding of that back and forth communication piece is probably the place to start there. I don't do a ton of augmentative communication work. Like I said, my specialty right now is really in feeding. So I think that Amy's going to have a better answer for that, but that's my thought there.
I wouldn't disagree with what you've said. At the minute, I have a 2 years, 11 months using an iPad because he's using it to sort of say, you know, I want a drink, I want some food, and he's phenomenal with it. So I don't think there's like you say, there's no age limit on it. It's very much about, can you understand the exchange, basically. So yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. Before we finish our conversation, any other comment, any other device that you'd like to put out there for the families? Gonna turn around. Amy Clugston.
What about using their phones? My son has a phone, so he carries it everywhere. Unlike an iPad, it fits in his pocket. So
That's absolutely fine. I've got a 6-year-old boy using his phone for his Proloquo in his school. Works perfectly.
Yeah, Lorna did use, we tried to use her phone, but again, she wouldn't, you know, she wouldn't use it outside of clinic. So, but some other things I think about early in Lorna's life is we would put labels on things. And I think I've seen other parents do that, like labels on things throughout the house that had maybe the word and a symbol, just to help them get used to identifying symbols with things. And so I think that's a good tactic to take as well.
We use FaceTime a lot to make Anders a little bit more independent, so he can go on his bike in the town. He can go visit someone because he can't call me. I wouldn't understand what he was saying. But when he FaceTimes, I can see where he is. So I think that had made him much more independent. He can go shopping. The grocery store is just on the other side of the road, so it's pretty easy for him. But he can make it on his own because he uses FaceTime when he's in doubt about something. So I can talk to the groceries or something. So we use it a lot for that, and we use it also to keep others calm, because a lot of these children also have difficulties keeping their body still. They're very active children. So I think that these devices also helps them concentrate about the things that they need to concentrate on right now. And they all have these interests in these electronic devices. I know a lot of them have it in radios and washing machines and so on. So I think this is also something that is helping them to want to learn. What is it? What is the word I'm looking for? Motivated.
I can attest that's like really motivating. Luna's first word was iPad. Not mom, not dad, was iPad. I couldn't believe that, but yeah. All right, so as I mentioned in the presentation, we are gonna have I'm gonna share the presentation, like the deck, and has a slide. I'm trying to go here to the slide. I don't know why it's not showing. See? Oh, there you go. We have some of those links that has like the DYRK1A.org has some information about the research that are going on, how to subscribe to our blog, how to subscribe to the DYRK1A Digest and get more information. The DYRK1A Bonfire store has like all these shirts, new shirts that you can buy. You can easily find us on social media. And here's the speech research. So if you send an email to angela.morgan@mcri.edu.au and participate, as we mentioned, there's other languages available. And after she has some more information and some more details about the DYRK1A variant and the impact on speech, she's gonna present in one of like the DYRK1A Insights. So we need your participation. We need you to have more data and information. Before we finish, I'm gonna get here a little poll, and see here. If you can pretty briefly just answer, is gonna help us understand if it was helpful or not, how we're getting information from our side, and of course, what other topics and things would help you during this journey. Thank you very much. Thank you for our panelists, Amy Klugster and Rush, Linda, and Jen. Appreciate very much your support here. Have a great evening, great rest of your day, and talk to you next time.
Great to see you, and thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you. Well, it's great to meet you face to face. I hope all those is passed and we're gonna be able to actually meet each other. I would love to attend family meetup in Europe. One of those days, I'm sure I'm gonna be able to do it. All right, take care, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.